Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 2, Episode 18, entitled Profit and Loss. This episode aired March 20th, 1994. Apparently, the show took a few weeks off in March for some reason. I don't know why. I thought maybe something big was happening in March of 94, so I Googled it. But I have to say that the only thing I remember on the list was that Zsa Zsa Gabor declared bankruptcy. I don't remember anything else.
Oh, well, that might be a big deal in Hollywood.
I'm sure this somehow caused a ripple in space-time that impacted DS9.
I see.
Okay, before we get started on this episode, anything to say about the previous podcast?
No, it was perfect.
It was definitely a snooze fest. That's what I remember about the episode entitled Playing God. Very boring.
Oh, it was just a miserable episode.
It was a miserable dude and a miserable episode.
Yes, I would have to agree.
With rats.
Six-legged voles.
Yes.
They were actually the best thing in the episode.
Oh my god.
That little rubber puppet did get a lot of use. You know, they often sell off the props for those episodes. I wonder who actually has that now. I bet there's some collector somewhere who has the original six-legged Cardassian vole.
Oh, gross. I hope they threw it away. It was gross.
Well, you're not a big fan of rodents.
No, especially big ones. All right, let's get into the cold open.
Okay.
There's a damaged and unresponsive Cardassian shuttle wobbling around outside of the station. Sisko orders a tractor beam to pull them into a cargo bay. And then we go down to the cargo bay.
And when they tractor the ship in, to Cargo Bay 7, by the way, you can see there's like blackened marks on it, like blast marks, perhaps.
Yes. 3 Cardassians dressed in like normal person clothes, not uniforms like we usually see Cardassians in.
Yeah.
Exit the damaged shuttle.
I didn't think Cardassians had any other clothes and uniforms.
One is wearing a very form-fitting, fancy white dress. She says she's Professor Natima Lang, and the other 2 standing silently next to her are her students, Rekelin and Hogue. I don't know if you have picked up on this, but I miss all the purple outfits we got in Season 1. We hardly ever in Season 2 say something about purple. We've seen some lavender things, but what happened to all the deep purples in Season 1?
Yeah, that was the purple season.
This is a perfect opportunity for purple outfits, these 3 guys.
You did enjoy the purple outfits.
Yeah.
Well, she's wearing a wedding dress anyway.
Hogue is kind of a scary dude. His neck is actually wider than his head. It's very off-putting. Professor Natima says they were caught in a meteor storm, and she asks if Miles will be able to repair the ship. He heads in to have a look. She says she knows that having Cardassians on a Bajoran station may cause trouble, and they'd like to get on their way quickly. I thought, well, somebody finally with emotional intelligence has landed on Deep Space Nine, and it was very surprising that it was a Cardassian, but obviously there was more to the story.
Well, Sisko actually says, and I quote, "If you stick the promenade, I'm sure there won't be any trouble." Apart from, that time the Cardassian got stabbed in the back on the promenade.
Yeah, I also thought that was funny to tell them to stick to the promenade. It would have been better if he had said, I'll give you some quarters and you just go hang out there.
Yeah.
No, just go hang out in the promenade. It'll be fine. I'm sure nobody will stab you.
Well, if they're Cardassians out of uniform, they might be a little less provocative.
It is possible. What's his name from Duet? Maritza?
Yeah.
He wasn't wearing a uniform, right?
No, but he still looked like a Cardassian. Cardassian military, rather.
He was definitely scary. I don't know. I agree. That was bad advice.
Yeah.
Anyway, Natima is played by Mary Crosby, daughter of Bing Crosby, but honestly, she's so much more known for being the one who shot JR.
Yes. As soon as I saw her, I'm like, I know her. Who is that?
Yeah. I mean, we don't cover that in this episode, but I feel that we should cover it in the podcast.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, now we go to Quark's, and Garak and Bashir are chatting over drinks. They're discussing someone named General Yuri, who executed his brother for being a traitor to the Trelawney government. Garak says Yuri had to choose between protecting his brother and protecting the state, and he chose the state, which Garak says is what he would do as well, every time.
I found that surprising. For an alleged spy, he was being shockingly open in his personal beliefs. I mean, he was giving away something about what he believed, protecting the state over personal loyalties. And it didn't seem like he was being deliberately deceptive. He was like plainly stating it, which seemed oddly truthful for Garak.
Well, I think there's one of 2 things at play. Either he is just trolling Bashir a little bit because he finds that fun, and that's what he did the very first time that he met him, or they actually have established enough of a relationship that they can have these sort of philosophical talks.
I still find it odd that Garak would be that honest.
But was he? Was he being honest? We're going to cover that.
It's entirely possible he wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, he could be trolling Bashir, who has that very principled view of the world that you get from the Federation and Starfleet.
Well, I think Starfleet would be about protecting Starfleet. So I feel like the Starfleet principles would be about protecting the state. It's just a different kind of state. It's more like a philosophy. But ultimately, they would want you to protect Starfleet over your family, wouldn't they? The needs of the many.
If you're a Vulcan, yes.
I don't know. Well, at any rate, Bashir says, before you can be loyal to another, you must be loyal to yourself. And Garak calls this view misguided and says Bashir wouldn't last 5 seconds on Cardassia, which is probably true.
Yes.
And then Bashir does the usual of grilling him about whether or not he's a spy or an outcast. And Garak says, maybe I'm an outcast spy, which was funny.
I love Garak's cynicism.
Yes. Some of this conversation and the few times when they have been having conversations, it's almost pointless because nothing really happens, but it's also building up this relationship. And you kind of knew this was going to have some meaning later, even though it wasn't directly part of the story. And also it's kind of endearing the way the two of them are.
Oh, yes. Well, I think Bashir is very much a young idealist, and that plays off nicely. I could see that being appealing to Garak as someone who's a very cynical spy, operative, whatever.
Is he? We don't know that yet.
You know, maybe that would be entertaining for Garak. Of here's somebody who is completely based on their principles.
And also, it's possible, too, that he believes that he can influence Bashir because is such a young, inexperienced person.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you're right. That could very much be a motivation for I could get something useful out of Bashir. Yeah.
And I think from Bashir's point of view, nobody else actually wants to spend time with him, so Garak is his one friend.
Aw.
No one else likes spending time with him. Come on.
Yeah, there's that, yeah.
Then Odo marches into the bar and goes up to Quark, saying he's heard a rumor that Quark has gotten his hands on a small cloaking device. Quark says, do you believe everything you hear? And Odo says, when it's about you, yes. And then he reminds Quark that a device like that is highly illegal according to Bajoran law. Quark denies it, and Odo says if you try to sell it, you'll spend 50 years digging trenches in a penal colony.
If only Quark would ever be held accountable for anything he did.
I know it, right? It's just like, oh, please, nothing ever happens to Quark. Why even bother threatening him? It's a waste of time.
So did you notice the perfect framing in this shot?
Yeah.
Top left corner, there is Morn perfectly in frame.
Way in the back. Yeah, that was funny.
There is a direct correlation between good episodes and Morn being in them.
That's interesting. I should have been keeping track in my spreadsheet of which episodes had Morn and which didn't.
Oh. I'll guarantee we can find that on the web.
At this point, Quark catches sight of Natima on the promenade and pushes through the crowd to get to her. She sees him and then immediately slaps him across the face, saying, I told you never to speak to me again, and stomps off.
Shouldn't that be the traditional method of greeting a Ferengi?
Definitely. Odo asks him if he's all right, and Quark says this is the happiest day of his life, and he runs after her. I did not see that coming. And we cue the theme song. That was a really long opening.
It was. A lot happened there.
And it's funny because after 3 or 4 kind of dud episodes, this one's already better than what we've been seeing.
Yes.
We've got multiple things going on. We've had some humor. We've accused Quark of treachery, and also Quark got slapped. I'm in. Let's go.
Violence against a Ferengi. That's a good start.
So Quark chases after Natima, and when he hears she's a professor and the other 2 are her students, he makes a smarmy comment about sitting in on one of her classes. And we were off to such a good start, and then it just sort of went gross because he just has to make everything sound disgusting.
He is a Ferengi.
Her students say that she teaches political ethics, and her teachings will change the future of Cardassia. Natima shushes them, and Quark kind of herds them all into Quark, saying they can have a drink, and it would be like old times.
Political ethics that will change the future of Cardassia.
That's what he said.
Yeah, I'm having the feeling that the Cardassian authorities probably don't like that very much.
Natima says it will never be like old times. Quark goes to the bar to get drinks, and Odo asks how well the woman knows him. Just enough to dislike you, or well enough to really hate you? Which was awesome. Odo understands.
That's worthy of Kira, that put down.
It kind of was. Quark says she used to work on the station as a correspondent with the Cardassian Information Service, which, I don't know, either she's a journalist or she's a purveyor of propaganda. I'm not sure what the Cardassian Information Service is.
I believe the propaganda service is a more accurate description.
Yes. Quark tells Odo that he was the love of her life, which seems a little far-fetched. But he makes one drink and then he delivers it to Natima. And then the students ask where their drinks are. And he says, go get it yourselves, which I really thought was funny. So they leave. That way he gets to be alone with her. And Quark tells Natima that she's as beautiful as ever. And she says, he's as big a liar as ever. Just like old times, Quark says.
It's honestly hard to believe that Quark isn't lying all the time.
All the time. Totally. Eventually, Garak and Bashir come down the stairs, and Garak actually quietly gasps when he sees Natima.
Yeah.
But as he walks by, he just kind of nods at her. The students immediately panic and run over to the table saying they thought there were no Cardassians on the station. Natima says, we have to leave as soon as possible, and they all run out of quarks.
So, do you think Garak knew who she was at that point?
I don't know if he knew who she was, but he knew who the two students were.
Ah, okay. Because, yeah, he totally had a shocked look on his face and then immediately recovers himself. And then quickly does that smile and walks out and nods.
And he's like, oh, hi. I mean, it's also, I suppose, possible in a more far-fetched version of the story that he was shocked to see Cardassians on the station, which he was when he saw that Cardassian kid.
Yeah.
Back in that episode called Cardassians. But it's possible he was just shocked and then he called his friends, whoever his friends are, to say oh, I saw these three people. And they're like, hey, these three people are on the run. I don't know. That seems more far-fetched. Yeah. I think he knew. He probably reads the Cardassian Times or something, so he's up to date on who they're chasing.
Oh, he probably reads the Cardassian Information Service regularly.
Oh, Lord. There you go.
Maybe she was his favorite journalist.
Maybe.
So this is actually a little bit of fandom.
Oh, right. He wanted her autograph?
Yeah. Can I get a selfie with you?
Get Rom's imaging device. Oh, my gosh. In Ops, Miles is telling the crew that Natima's ship wasn't hit by a meteor storm. It was hit by Cardassian disruptors.
Uh-oh, her story is falling apart.
Just then, Natima and her students come up the elevator saying they need their ship right away. She admits that they were fired on by Cardassians and they don't like to involve others in their own politics. Sisko's like, being shot at by your own people goes a little beyond politics, which is always like saying humans wouldn't fire on other humans. I mean, that's just so silly to me.
I feel you get a little of that Cardassian bigotry coming out here. The way she says they don't involve outsiders, especially Bajorans. Mm-hmm. Here are clearly educated, progressive Cardassians, and they're still kind of making, bigoted comments against the Bajorans.
I didn't read that as bigoted.
Really?
No.
In that situation, you could have said, especially humans or the Federation and Trill.
But she didn't say it with that tone.
I thought she did.
I guess I didn't hear it that way. To me, it was just like, wow, especially we're keeping Bajorans out of our politics because that is bad news. If you're looking at it like the Bajorans could cause a lot of uproar in our politics or in our, I don't know if it had to be politics. What's the word I'm looking for?
No, I think you're right, politics, because the occupation of Bajor is a divisive issue on Cardassia. So I see what you're saying. The Cardassian mentioning the Bajorans getting involved in Cardassian politics would be extremely polarizing.
Exactly. And she's trying to look at a more progressive, democratic future of Cardassia. It's not like she said, we don't want to be like the Bajorans. It's like we try to keep others out of our politics, especially the people that we tortured for however many years, 50 years.
Especially people who don't like us because we were awful to them.
Yes. Or hate us.
Yeah.
So I didn't read it as bigotry. I read it as that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll accept that as a viewpoint.
You'll take that under advisement?
Yes.
Now we're in Sisko's office, and they're telling him that some believe the future of Cardassia should not lie in the hands of the military. So, of course, the military doesn't take too kindly to this way of thinking, and that makes them fugitives.
I believe on Cardassia, you would call those traitors.
Right. The female student says the military has already tried to kill them once, and they'll definitely do it again. I had to look up who this actress was because once she started talking, I was like, wow, I feel like I know that person.
Yes.
And it's Heidi Swedberg. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but anyway, she played Susan on Seinfeld around the same time. Not at all in 94, which was funny, but before and after this. And she was in 28 total episodes, which I was really surprised to read. They say that they saw another Cardassian on the station, which Sisko's like, yeah, Garak. And he admits that he doesn't know if it's a problem that they saw him or that I guess that Garak saw them because Garak is a bit of a mystery. Sisko says he'll assign them guest quarters so that they can go and wait there, which he should have done in the first place, and then Garak never would have seen them. And then he sighs, because Cardassian troubles are his least favorite kind of troubles, because it almost always means Dukat calls him. Though not this time.
Well, maybe they could help him with the Cardassian vole problem.
That's a good point. They didn't even ask them. They should have.
Yeah.
Do you know how to deal with these possums?
Six-legged possum.
Now we're in Garak's clothiers, which is a word I cannot say. It's a very strange word. You don't use it in everyday language.
Clothiers.
Quark enters and pretends to be shopping. Eventually, they get to the point of discussing Natima and how each of them were looking at her while they were in Quark's bar. And then Garak makes some kind of metaphor about fashion that is supposed to relate to Natima, and it's very confusing. But ultimately, he gets to the point of saying she's got some dangerous companions and Quark should not associate with them.
Yeah, they dance around a lot before they get to really Garak saying what he means in this situation.
Well, that is Garak's way.
Did you see that as a metaphor or as an allegory?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I actually looked it up. But I admit I did not go back and re-listen to it, so I may be remembering it wrong, but now I feel like I need to go and rewatch it to make sure I'm not being stupid, or we'll have to correct it in next week's podcast.
Yeah, no, it'll be fine. I do find it hard to believe that Quark, considering how well he dresses, has never been into Garak's establishment.
Exactly, so who's making his natty clothes?
Maybe it's Rom.
That seems unlikely. But yeah, I thought that same thing. I'm like, I figured for sure he was in there buying his clothes. Maybe there's a discount place farther down the promenade in a less prominent spot.
Ah, discount natty Ferengi-sized clothes.
No, there's an outlet mall on the other side of the promenade.
Oh, nice.
That's where all of Garak's irregulars are.
Another thing I thought was funny in this scene is when Quark says, they'll have to get through me. And Garak says, what will you do, shortchange them at the Darbo table? Couldn't Quark point out, I have enough funds to hire well-armed mercenaries?
Yeah, I don't know. Their whole conversation was weird.
Yeah.
They were just trying to feel each other out a little bit. I mean, Quark just wanted to know what his interest was in Natima. I'm not sure he was expecting to be warned off of her as dangerous.
Yeah, I don't think Quark is very good at even making threats.
No. Yeah. Then we go to Natima's quarters, and Quark says he wants to help her. He says he owes her because if she had turned him into the authorities, he would have been executed. This is a thing that Quark says all the time, that if something happened, I would have been executed.
He's very good at not getting executed. As we've seen on the station, he's done all these terrible things and gets away with them. And
nobody ever does anything to him, so I don't know why he's worried about being executed.
Yeah,
maybe because he realizes if somebody actually did finally hold him responsible for something, there'd be so many things that he'd be executed. I don't know.
Well, maybe he learned his trade of not getting executed under the Cardassians, which is why he's so good at never having to face the consequences of his actions.
Maybe. Of course, what we learn here is that he actually ripped off Cardassians.
Yeah.
We haven't got to that part of the story, but then maybe the Cardassians would have executed him. Well, she says she admired his courage because he was selling food to the Bajorans, and she thought he was a man of honor. And Quark says, I'm a Ferengi, you should have known better, which was great.
Yep.
He reminds her that they fell in love and spent a month together, and it was the best time of their lives. But she says he betrayed her by stealing money from her employer, who was the Cardassian Information Service. And as a Ferengi, he views that as a victimless crime. And he says he doesn't regret that he did that, but he regrets betraying her trust.
Oh, wow.
You use everyone for profit, she says.
So he stole from her and betrayed her trust. Of course he did.
Well, he didn't steal from her. That was his point. I stole from your employer because he used her code or something to get it. It's like he put in a false expense report under her name. That's the way I envisioned it.
Oh, yeah, that seems fair.
Yeah. I wrote down here, Ferengis do what Ferengis do. Quark wants to make it up to her and says he asks for nothing in return, which isn't quite true. She has to stay with him forever, so he is asking for something. But she says she's part of the Cardassian underground now, and her students need her. Quark says he'll follow her anywhere, but she points out that that would get him killed. And he says he doesn't care. He is usually an incredible coward, so the fact that he says that, I don't know if he really believes that, but
yeah,
he probably does love her if that's the case.
Well, she delivers this great line of, you say you'd do anything for me, and you might even believe it.
Yes.
And I feel that would be a good description of Quark. He might say these things in the moment, but if it came to a crunch, I think everything we've seen of Quark is he would chicken out.
Yeah, he would run.
Yeah.
Well, she tells him to leave anyway, and he does.
I think she has him pegged.
She
knows what she's dealing with.
Hey, she spent a month with him. She knows a lot about him because he's not that complex. In Ops, Miles says the professor's ship will be ready to go in about an hour. But a Cardassian warship is approaching, taking up an attack posture. They raise shields just as Garak wanders very slowly into Ops, telling Sisko, we should talk. And we go to an ad break.
Now, as this is Bajoran space, why is there no effort from Bajor to defend the station from the Cardassians? You know, even those small interceptor ships that they have.
Well, it takes a few hours to get from Bajor to the station, so maybe they're on the way.
True. I was wondering as well if they're worried about provoking the Cardassians, giving them any kind of pretext to attack Bajor.
Maybe. They haven't shown that that's their main fear recently, but it could be. We haven't visited Bajor in a while.
Because the Cardassians do seem to be treating Bajor as like just their backyard. I mean, they didn't even hail the station.
That's true.
And did you notice Garak just wanders into Ops?
Yeah, everybody just wanders into Ops.
They need to at least get one of those keypads for the door.
That's what I said. Like in a hotel, you at least need to scan your key to get up there.
Yeah.
They got everybody wandering in there.
I suppose the downside is Garak could pretty quickly figure out the code is 4, 3, 2, 1.
But like last week, remember, Quark just wandered in there with the dead Vol. I mean, anybody can go in there. It's just an elevator.
You can bring your dead vermin in.
It's ridiculous. Now we go to Sisko's office, and Garak is saying that the warship is just here to make sure they have Sisko's undivided attention. He tells Sisko that Professor Lang's so-called students are actually more like terrorists to the Cardassian government. Sisko asks if Central Command thinks the students are dangerous, and Garak says hardly. They're more annoying than dangerous. If they were dangerous, would Central Command entrust the situation to me, a simple tailor? Sisko points out that a Bajoran station under Federation command is unlikely to turn over political refugees, and Garak says the decision is yours. I'm just relaying a message.
Sisko is getting annoyed with Garak's politicking here.
Yes.
And Garak is so trying to downplay this as, it's just nothing. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, if it were not a big deal, there wouldn't be a warship there, and you would be in my office.
Yeah.
That's the way Sisko is looking at it. Well, a very annoyed Sisko tells him to relay this message. If anyone attempts to take the students by force, I will respond in kind. Garak says he will relay the message, and then he tells Sisko to stop by his shop sometime and get a new suit. Just like, okay, man.
I like how Sisko does the quiet voice and just spells it out very clearly. He'll respond to any attack in kind. I think the Cardassians, what we've seen today is they're very much a push things to see how far they can take it.
Yep.
If they think they can get away with it, they will push as far as they can.
Right.
I assume Garak was sent in there to see how serious Sisko was. I think we're seeing that there's clearly a back channel or a direct channel between Cardassia and Garak here, that he's being used as effectively a diplomat and has been told to get a reading on Sisko. Is he going to stand up for himself?
Well, the first thing the Cardassians do is they always go to Starfleet. Right? Yeah. They always try going through somebody in Starfleet rather than trying to get permission from the Bajorans to do anything. So I imagine they thought they'd just turn up at the station and ask for those 3 terrorists or whatever, and Sisko would just hand them over. I mean, it's never worked, but that's what they keep doing every time. Mm-hmm. Now we're in Quark's bar, and Quark is trying to grill the students for info about Natima, but she had already warned them about him, which was pretty funny. Quark says he's the only person who can help them get safely off the station, which does get their attention. And then Quark smacks the table, and he sticks his finger in the drink on the table to make sure they aren't Odo. Finally, somebody is checking to see if Odo is there. I thought that was really funny.
For all the time he's known Odo, it seems to have taken this long for him to actually learn. Check for Odo before you start talking about things.
Oh, when he smacked the table, I was like, what the heck was that? And then, okay, good plan.
Yeah, that made me laugh.
Yes.
I was like, nice touch, people.
He quietly tells them that he has an old cloaking device that will work for about 15 minutes, which will help them escape. And then he says he'll give it to them as a gift with a string attached. Natima must stay behind, and they agree to go and tell her.
Did you notice Hogue mentions their crimes? There's no real explanation of what they are.
No, they talk a little bit more about it in Odo's scene, but you never hear the details.
Were these acts of sabotage, or is it simply disagreeing with the government?
Yeah, it seemed like it was just disagreeing with the government because we don't ever hear any detail about what it is. It's almost like they didn't know what it should be, so they just didn't write anything, and they just talked about it generally.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a weak point in the story.
Well, Garak used the phrase terrorist, which gives the implication that they're bombing things and killing people.
Yes.
But in Cardassian society, does terrorism equate to they disagreed with the government? They printed flyers that said there's a better way.
Right. They told people to vote.
That's terrible.
It is terrible.
What's next? Representative government?
Yeah. Now we're back in Natima's quarters, and she tells Quark that she can't stay, regardless of the deal he struck with the students. He argues, but she threatens him with a phaser, which, how did she get the phaser past the weapons detector?
If I was Quark, I would back off at this point because she shot JR.
Exactly.
Just going to point that out.
That's exactly
She already
right.
has a record with a gun.
That is totally right. But he feels very confident that she won't shoot and reaches for the phaser, but she does shoot him at really point blank range, and he falls over, dropping the cloaking device. And we go into an ad break. So it was super funny. It was like we've done a complete Who Shot JR, right? Where she shot him, and then we went to an ad break.
Yeah. You know, the writers were probably laughing their heads off.
You know it.
Yeah.
You know it. I mean, at this point, it was like 14 years later, because I think that was 1980, which is crazy. But after the ad break, Quark is not dead, and we find out that she shot him by accident, and she's quite upset about it. She'd never fired a phaser before, so she didn't know what she was doing.
Yeah, she said she put it on the lowest setting.
Yeah, she did say it was on the lowest setting. He's like, oh, well, that's nice. Quark takes the phaser away from her, saying, be careful. Now she admits that she still loves him and has always loved him, even when she hated him. She says the underground movement is her life now, and she doesn't have time for anything else. And she says she can't abandon her students. He convinces her that he loves her, and she eventually agrees to stay. But then the doorbell rings, and Odo enters, saying that Professor Lang is under arrest. And apparently, Odo didn't see the cloaking device that Quark dropped on the floor, because he'd been looking for that thing. So Sisko comes into the little jail cells to tell Natima and her students that they're going to be turned over to the Cardassian government. The Bajoran Provisional Government, drink, has agreed to a deal whereby the Cardassians will release half a dozen Bajoran prisoners in exchange for these three. I thought we had already brokered all the deals and that everybody was supposed to be released by the Cardassians already.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We'd already had that in the start of this season. All the prisoners were supposed to have been turned over.
Maybe there's a difference between the prisoners of war and other prisoners. I
don't know. I mean, you wouldn't think so.
It seemed like a mistake.
Well, I have the feeling that Cardassians just lie about everything anyway, so...
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah, it turns out we found a few more prisoners.
Oh, there was yet another planet that had some on there. Sisko does say that he's fighting in every way he can, but ultimately it's a Bajoran station and not his decision.
I can see this from the Bajorans' perspective. What do they care about Cardassian politics if they can get something out of it?
Right.
Clearly, the Cardassians continue to lie about holding Bajoran prisoners, so I guess it's in their interests. Plus, I suppose if we're being really cynical about it, the Bajorans might actually encourage this because it could cause instability on Cardassia. These people might have followers, and turning them into martyrs, or even starting a more aggressive movement to overthrow the military on Cardassia could be in Bajoran interests. So, yeah, I could see how it would work for them.
We go back to Garak's clothiers, and we meet Gul Toran, who enters saying, how the mighty have fallen, to Garak, and the two insult each other for a bit.
Yeah, it seemed Garak knew Toran when he was a lower rank, and was surprised that he was made a Gull. And clearly the guy is either a rival to Garak or somebody Garak didn't like, because there was no love lost between these two.
No, definitely not. Toran says he finds Garak's bitterness extremely gratifying, and he's glad to see that he's adjusting to his exile so poorly. Garak says he's actually finding his time in exile quite illuminating. Toran implies that Garak could be allowed to go home again if the three prisoners didn't make it off the station alive.
So we're seeing some real Cardassian intrigue here.
Yeah.
The High Command want Garak to kill them.
And we've learned that he's officially in exile. I don't know that we learned that before.
No. Well, this does. It confirms that he is a Cardassian in exile. He can't go back to Cardassia.
And we also learn in this scene that he's the one who contacted Central Command. That comes out about the presence of the students on the station.
Right. So that communications channel is pretty much confirmed at this point.
Right. Which we did see that already in the episode called Cardassians, because he was in contact with someone.
Yeah.
Well, Garak thinks if they kill the students, they'll become martyrs, but Turan says they're too insignificant for that. Garak gets the point of the visit, and Turan leaves. Quark enters security to find Odo reading a book by Mickey Spillane. Quark tells him he has to let the 3 prisoners go. It's important for the future of a free Cardassia. Odo scoffs because he understands that Quark doesn't really care about politics. He just cares about Natima.
Very out of character for Quark.
Absolutely. Then he pleads with Odo, saying they're like brothers, which makes Odo scoff again. And then he begs him on his knees, and Odo eventually says he'll do it, but not for Quark. He'll free them in the name of justice, because they've done nothing warranting being put to death. Apparently he looked up their records and didn't think it was a big deal.
Quark's pretty serious here. He offers up to give details on every scheme and every crooked thing that Rom is involved in.
That's right. He made it sound like he was going to make this big deal of himself, and then it was like, Rom. Yeah. And Odo's like, never mind.
Even for the woman he loves, allegedly, he can't not be 100% Ferengi.
It's so true.
This is why she would have to be insane to be involved with him.
Absolutely.
And when he says to Odo, I consider you as dear to me as my brother. So that means that he'll rip Odo off at any chance he can get.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Odo's read the rules of acquisition, so know how little that appeal would work.
That's right. I don't think Odo was moved by him at all.
No.
Although then why didn't he just let them out? Why did he wait until Quark came in?
I'm guessing he was enjoying a little bit of groveling from Quark.
Well, Quark then hugs him to thank him, which Odo does not approve of. Let's hurry, Quark says, and they head towards the cells to let Natima and her students out. But Odo then realizes that Quark really does have the cloaking device, and that's his plan to get them free. So that was funny.
Yeah.
So in the cell, when they let them out, Natima thanks Odo, and he says, good luck, as they follow Quark out. Quark has installed the cloaking device in their ship, which is a little hand-wavy. I don't know how he managed to do that. And he's walking them back to their ship. But when they get to the airlock, Garak is there with a phaser pointed at them. Quark asks why he's doing this, and Garak says exile is wearing thin. And then there's a lot of talking and no shooting, enough for Gul Turan to turn up with another phaser pointed at everyone. How do all these phasers get through the stupid, pointless detectors? It's ridiculous.
Well, they're Cardassian ones. They probably don't detect for them.
Maybe. Turan says Garak was made soft after 2 years living with the Bajorans. And they trade a few more insults, and we learn that this act alone wouldn't get Garak back to Cardassia, so he lowers his phaser. But then Turan is about to shoot one of the students, and Garak shoots him instead. And then he rushes them off to their ship. Quark tells Garak that he'll see to it that every Ferengi on the station shops at Garak's shop, and Garak says, that alone makes this all worth it, which was great. The students rush off to the ship, and Quark stops to kiss Natima. He still thinks she's staying, but she tells him she's not. She says maybe one day she can come back, but not until her work is done. He says, so I have to wait for Cardassia to be a free and democratic society? She says she'll make it worth the wait, and kisses him again, and says she'll always love him, and then she leaves.
I guess it's got to be really hard to do those stage kisses in all that makeup with all that prosthetic.
And the fake teeth and oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But this was good because she did get to stiff him on a deal.
That's true. She did. Garak then says, we'd better return to the promenade without delay. Quark asks him why he shot Turan, and he says because he loves Cardassia. And that's the thing about love. No one really understands it, do they? And then it's the end.
And close.
And I'm so confused. I have questions.
You do.
But I will let you have your overanalysis. What have you got?
Okay. From what we said earlier, this does demonstrate that Garak is effectively a spy on Deep Space Nine for the Cardassians.
He's not a simple tailor.
Yeah, he's much more of a representative for the Cardassian military.
Well, is he? Because if he's really in exile,
yes.
Is he just feeding back information to try to get the exile lifted? Or I guess in hopes of getting it lifted? Or is he an actual spy placed there that's his post?
Well, that part we don't really know.
Right.
I mean, he shot Turan and said the reason why was because he loves Cardassia. So maybe he's in exile, but he wants to return on his own terms and sees things that the military are doing or the way Cardassia is being run is against his principles or how he thinks it should be run.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out because it's all very confusing. And then you weave it in with that thing with him and Bashir earlier.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make a ton of sense. And also, somebody shot the gull.
Disintegrated him.
Yeah, I think his ship is going to notice that.
Maybe you could say, oh, well, perhaps he left with the terrorists.
Oh, that's a good idea, actually. That is what Garak should say. I saw him get on board with the terrorists.
Yeah. Following on from what we just talked about, I think Garak must have known this would not get him into the good graces of Central Command. That even if he'd carried out the orders and executed the 3 dissidents, that it wouldn't be enough. I assume his enemies were significantly influential enough to make sure he wouldn't be able to return. Maybe it was more a case of him doing these things to get revenge on Turan.
But he said that he did it because he loves Cardassia.
Well, because I think that because he looks at Turan as a very bad choice to be a gull. It's somebody that he doesn't think should be in that position.
You don't think it's because he believes in a future free Cardassia?
We don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think that can really be said one way or the other. I mean, you could take the implication, but we don't really know what his view of Cardassia is. But he looks at Cardassian society, as we learned at the beginning, as most important over personal loyalties and ties.
Right. He said he would shoot his own brother to protect the state. And if you follow that into this scene, if Turan is the brother, then he's done something to protect the state. Maybe, I guess it could be 2 things. It could be he's protecting the state from having these 3 as martyrs because he believes that that's really what would happen.
That's a really good point.
Or he's protecting the potential free Cardassia future.
It could be that he understands the risk of making them martyrs. And it's less of a risk of letting them just go and, if you like, fade into obscurity. And
rather than do the thing that might get him back, because he didn't really think that that was going to happen. Yeah, he decided to do this. That's interesting. So I guess if you looked at it that way, he was protecting the state.
Right, in the bigger picture.
Wow, that's flimsy.
I think that's one of the things that makes this a better episode, is you could look at it at either way. You could look at it at, he's very much protecting the status quo. And the people who have this idea of killing them it's going to upset the status quo. Or you could look at it as he's doing these things because he wants them to escape, because they are an option for a future Cardassia that will be better.
It's so funny, but these kind of ambiguous lessons and these, ambiguous storylines, or the ones at least that end with this ambiguity, seem to be the better DS9 episodes, but I would not have liked that on Next Gen.
Yeah.
I like the more certainty of the Starfleet message and of the character development and whatever. It's so different here.
Yeah.
These make the better episodes.
I think so. It's very much a different show.
Yeah.
The Next Generation had very much those clear lines drawn.
Well, I think we've talked about this before, but at least so far, we're 18 episodes into season 2, and at least so far, this is not a show about hope.
Yeah.
And Next Gen was much more a show about hope.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to one of my earlier statements, which is I see this show as very much a case of doing what needs to be done to make things work today.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure we can get through to tomorrow, and I'll deal with tomorrow's problems tomorrow. And I think that's very much the message of this show, if you like. You can't use the cut and dried Starfleet Federation rules.
Right.
You have to do something different. And I think most of these stories are showing that, of the subtlety of this very different situation that they all find themselves in.
I guess that's the reason they set it not on a Federation station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing where Sisko is, these people deserve asylum. You can't turn them over. And he admits it's a Bajoran station. They get to make the rules when it's in their interests.
I think I'm giving them too much credit, but it's entirely possible that the vision of this was that we would be in this sort of triage mode for a while in the beginning to try to help hold things together while we have this longer plot of getting Bajor into the Federation and also Sisko getting back to a normal life after losing his wife. I really think I'm giving the writers too much credit because based on what we've seen so far, I'm not sure that holds. That would be great, but I'm not sure that holds.
Right. Okay. And my final overanalysis point.
Yeah.
I find it so hard to believe Quark in anything he says because he's too much of a Ferengi.
Yeah.
And I think she hit upon this, Natima, when she said he might even believe it.
Yeah.
It's difficult to believe that whole side of the story, just knowing that Quark could be in complete denial to himself. Oh, yes, I love her. I wouldn't betray her again. Oh, there's 300 bars of latinum? Yeah, I'm going to have to betray you for that.
Yeah, I have a little bit of that in my Women in the Future notes as well. Yeah. I find it very difficult to believe that Quark is able to love anyone.
Right.
More than he loves money.
Well, yeah, exactly. So that really is the problem I have with Quark and trying to see him as somebody who's still head over heels in love. The one that got away. This is the great love of his life. So that pretty much wraps up the analysis for me.
Well, this falls right into the next section of Women in the Future. First of all, I think this is such a TV trope where love and hate are a razor's edge apart because that's just not reality. That's not how the real world actually works. And this version of Quark makes no sense compared to how he treated Pell in the episode Rules of Acquisition. I'm supposed to believe now that he'd give up anything for love?
Yeah.
I mean...
Pell was his perfect partner.
Yeah, and in that episode, love made no sense to him. But now here he's like, oh, this was the love of my life and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, in that episode, women are lesser and they shouldn't be clothed and all that blah, blah, blah baloney. And then all of a sudden now it's like, oh, here's this person who I love more than anything. It was really hard for me to buy that as part of the story.
Yeah, he'd give up the bar.
Yeah, he said he was going to give up the bar and let Rom run it, which just seems very hard to believe.
Yeah.
And then there's the other thing, too, of how she was jumping back and forth so much, right? She went from I hate you to I love you in 2 seconds. And I really find that difficult to believe as well. So it was very hard to buy the love story.
Yeah.
Not because of the story itself, but because of the history of the character is what made it hard.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
It could have worked if we hadn't known this about the character. It could have worked if we'd not seen the Pell episode. Which,
of course, the most hated episode of the season for me, for sure. If we had just skipped right over that episode, maybe I would believe this, but it's just a little tough.
I think if you'd rearranged the order, this would have actually worked.
Yeah.
Because you would have seen Quark being in love with someone and being prepared to give things up. And then later on, you see how he can't overcome his own hang-ups, as it were, when he could be happy and with someone who could make him happy.
It's funny, but that would have made both episodes better.
Yes.
If they had swapped the order. Just simply. Just put one right after the other.
Well, yeah.
It would have improved them both. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, Quark wasn't able to look at love as being more important than profit, whereas in here, we know that he can. So then you would have been able to say, oh, well, he didn't love Pell as much as he loved that other person, or he would have been able to do it. But instead, they established that he's simply not able to look at it that way or understand it. And then a few episodes later, we're like, oh, no, he had this person who was the love of his life 5 years ago or whatever. I can't remember how many years ago it was. But
7.
Yeah, that was weak. All right, well, let's move on to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
I'm giving it a thumbs up. I enjoyed it in the rewatching. Definitely a thumbs up.
Yeah, I give it a thumbs up too. It had these weak points, but every single episode has something weak in it. But overall, it was pretty entertaining. I liked the extension of Garak's character because we haven't seen much of him. But I know a lot of people on Twitter talk about him being their favorite character. And I'm just like, okay, I've barely seen him. I don't know if he's my favorite yet. But I like that. I like the relationship between Bashir and Garak. I actually thought that was good and continues to grow.
Yes, it was definitely a building episode for that.
Yeah, all of that was good. And there wasn't any sexual harassment against any of the women who worked there. So, yeah, I'm always going to be happy if that happens or doesn't happen.
Yeah, it doesn't happen, I would think.
Doesn't happen, yeah. Okay, well, I think that wraps up season 2, episode 18.
And I guess this episode, the title actually does make sense.
Profit and loss. Yeah, it does. It is a good title.
About him wanting to make profit.
The loss of the love of his life.
Yeah, which was Pal. He was just too stupid to see it.
It was a better match.
Yes.
Okay. In the meantime, if you'd like to tell us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. Also, check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback for us there, which we've been getting a lot of feedback there on individual episodes. And you can also listen to all of the other awesome podcasts on our network.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.